about my grandfather who lived right here in Norwood. So I feel like it's a kind of a coming home of sorts, being here in the neighborhood. And then my first job in this field about 35 years ago was managing a group home right down the street here. Many moons ago, when there was a little less of me and I had a little more hair. But now personally, I've also entered the realm of having a family member with disability, as my mother's had a stroke. And she has pretty significant apraxia and aphasia with her speech, which Jennifer's taught me over the years. And she's also having some difficulty walking. And my father, they're both 88 years old, and my father's having some difficulty adjusting to that, his wife having a disability. And she was my mentor in this arena. She was a preschool teacher for Hamilton County back when we had preschools, and for 10 years. And I always like to give her a shout out and say that she was, when her 7th kid went to kindergarten, she went back to UC to get her master's degree in special ed. And I used to think, why would you do that? And now I know why she didn't get away from us. But she was really a terrific mentor. I spent a lot of time as a teenager in her classroom, and that was back in the days, interestingly enough. And her classroom was among the other church preschools. One was on Reading Road in Avondale, one was right here in Hyde Park. And the county had a classroom there, and there were 3 other classrooms that were part of the school, part of the church. So it was kind of integrated just by geography. They happened to be in the same place. They all shared the same playground, lunch area. It wasn't really an intentional inclusion program, it's just the way it was. And then the county, as the families who got together and developed all the services we now have, opened Fairfax School. Mom had to move to Fairfax School, where all of a sudden she had a principal and she had all these other supervisors, and she kind of lost her own little world there, and also lost the the interaction with the other children without disabilities. And so she decided to retire that first year that Fairfax opened. And I do want to give credit to the families. They really are the ones who built our entire system. And there would be no advocacy movement without the mothers especially. We often talk about our dear friend Marvin Moss and his mother Dorothy Moss, who when Marvin was born, again, not too far from here, right in Avondale, in 1946, his mother got together with 2 other moms who said, we have nothing for our children. We have no schools, we have no services, we really have nothing. And they started the first agency of its kind around here, originally called the Hamilton County Council for Retarded Children. And they started a preschool because that's where their kids were. And that became really a national movement. Cleveland and Cincinnati were the beginnings of the entire ARC movement across the country. And our whole system of the county boards were developed by families saying, we need something local. You know, as many of you know, it used to be you had your child at home 24/7, 365, or you were advised for your child to move away to a state institution. And not real good choices for any family. So those families decided we need to start a local service system, and that's when the Ohio County Boards of DD were started with House Bill 169. Some of you remember we used to call it the 169 board, and that's why it was called that in 1967. So in a couple years, it'll be 50 years ago. And Ohio still is fairly unique across the country to only have these local systems. A lot of states, like Kentucky and Indiana especially, have big regional systems. So you don't have a lot of local control, a lot of local support. We've been blessed in Hamilton County for all these many years that our levies every 5 years do pass, thanks to the good citizens of Hamilton County. We've never had a failing levy. I don't know if that keeps up. But also, the last 10 years, we haven't had an increase in the levy funds, and that's a big issue. As our last tax levy review committee accounting firm said to us, no organization can exist for 10 years with flat funding. And obviously, we continue to get more and more requests for services. We are trying desperately to address our waiting list to really see who really needs what and what it is. We know that a lot of people got on the waiting list because they were told to when their children were young, and they may or may not be ready for services still. They might have a 15-year-old who's still living with them, but they're looking to the future, which is good to be planning. As Lynn mentioned, we're really talking a lot these days about person-centered planning and trying to make that as individualized as possible within a bureaucracy. Statewide, the state of Ohio did pass its budget, a 2-year budget, at the end of June, and the Department of DD got the biggest increase ever. Historically, got the most funding ever. We got more than any other agencies, percentage-wise, which is a great thing. We're a small piece of the pie in the statewide budget, but we got thanks to our director, John Martin, who himself is a father of a son with complex needs in our system, and his staff, and working with Governor Kasich and Greg Moody. Some of you might have seen, it was in the media this weekend, that the state spent $2 billion less in Medicaid than they thought they would, which I think can only be good news for all of us. As you know, that Governor Kasich supported Medicaid expansion. He went up against a lot of Republicans to do that. Obviously, he's busy now running for president as well. But even though that great increase, it doesn't mean a whole lot to us locally. It may mean an additional 30 to 50 waivers, that kind of thing, which isn't a whole lot compared to what the need is there. But it is being addressed. There was a waiting list study across the state done by the DD Council last year, which Robert's a member of DD Council, and they determined that there were about 40,000 people on that waiting list, but only 20,000 of them really wanted the services now, which is still 20,000 people. That's a lot of people. But that's kind of the data that we're driving now to look at what people really need and what do they want and how can we support them. For example, locally, there's a few thousand families waiting, and we have a fairly new team now working with our introduction and eligibility group to determine what it is exactly those folks need. And maybe for them right now, the level 1 waiver might work for now, to provide some respite or support for their son or daughter while they're still at home. You've probably heard about the self-waiver. That's kind of the wave of the future, which is a lot more than the level 1 provides. It's a $40,000 cap versus only $5,000 cap. But it does require a lot more involvement and work by the family. Intentionally called a self-waiver because there's more administration by the family themselves. So there are a lot of happenings. The only big news we've gotten so far from the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services, known as CMS, is that Ohio requested that we be given a 10-year plan instead of a 5-year plan, and that was granted. So that actually starts at 9 years because it was requested as of 2014. So by 2024, the main focus of that for us as an agency is that we will no longer be able to provide both what the feds call targeted case management, TCM, we call it service and support administration, and direct service. So some of you remember back, we used to also have housing, residential services in the county, and that went away by statute. We couldn't provide the housing and the oversight, and now they're saying we can't provide the day program and the oversight as well, which in the long run is probably a good thing. You know, think back historically, 1985, when case management started in Ohio on a local level, Hamilton County was one of the very few counties across the state to contract that out. It was actually done through what's now known as the UCU set. And it was an outside agency providing that service, working with the county. And after a couple of years, for whatever reasons politically, that changed, and they ended up bringing it in-house to the county. Our board will make those decisions. There's been nothing definite yet, and I do send my greetings from our superintendent, Alice Casey, who couldn't be with us this morning. The board has been meeting on the program committee, talking about the plans for the future. But I think one of the messages that we want to give to people is that we've been here since 1967, and we're not going away. We have a tremendous amount of providers now that we never used to have. And like most things, there's some great providers, there's some middle-of-the-road providers, and there's some maybe not so great providers. Among hundreds and hundreds of agencies, from huge, large, national corporations to literally mom-and-pop providers. The other thing the state's doing new now residentially is called shared living, and that's going to look a little bit like what we used to call adult foster care. But they're kind of getting away from the word foster for a couple reasons. One is it's designed to be more permanent than foster care. Foster care is often seen as a temporary model for someone in crisis. And typically there's also not been any court action involved. It's not like somebody was, had to be removed from their home for abuse or neglect. It's a choice for them to live within a family structure. And again, those look really different. I mean, they can be, mom, dad, brother, sister, and then person with disability. It could be a single adult doing that. It could be any number of different combinations of families. And again, I think the big focus here is the choice. Having people really look at where they want their son or daughter to live, how they want it to look, as As most of you know, part of the plan also called for the closing of 2 more developmental centers, one in Montgomery County, one in Youngstown, Ohio. The legislature heard a lot about that in the budget testimony. There was a lot of pushback, a lot of concerns about changes. So now there's going to be a developmental center closure task force to look at that, how to do that properly. The state of Ohio, since John Martin took office under Governor Strickland, it's been 10 years now he's been in office, maybe a few more than that. They have reduced the number of people living in the developmental state-run centers by half, which is, again, the whole idea of integration and moving to the community, more person-centered, more individualized. But there are still a lot of people living there whose families choose for them to live there. One of the reasons they gave for closing Montgomery and Youngstown was that there was another developmental center within an hour's drive of each of those. The family switched, they could move to another center. That really had no reflection on that center's quality or anything like that. It really was a matter of geography. For families to visit, they could still be within an hour's drive. So without further ado, I just want to reassure you that the county is not going away. We will be here. We may look a little different, but nothing stays the same forever. The county commissioners are still overseeing us, and we also have appointments to our board by the probate court. Judge Winkler is our new probate judge. Some of you were there last fall when he spoke at our election night that Diana and Robert hosted. We had a huge crowd of about 100 people packed in a small room. And one of the things we learned that day is that his wife was there as well, and she's the clerk of courts in Hamilton County. And she has hired several people with disabilities within her system. So she was very supportive of our idea of community employment. So we know this is all a process. Sometimes it can be a little scary, but as we often say, it's one foot in front of the other, and somehow we'll make it work. So again, thanks to you all for being here today, and I'll introduce Eric and Mark, our speakers for this morning. Thank you.
Eric, while you're making your way up there, I just wanted to point out that this is not a reflection on Eric. I just forgot to mention it. This is your power tool. This is a jargon-free zone, so we ask that people not use too many acronyms, but sometimes we slip into our acronyms, and that's okay. But if there's something that you're stuck on or not able to follow, you can hold this up and stop the speaker, and they will respond, I promise.
That's the one thing that in the DD field, you learn your alphabet. That's right? Right, so we have all these acronyms. This is so important. I did not think that I would have a career with people with disabilities. In fact, I really, for the most part, had never met many people with disabilities. When I started back in 1988, a friend asked me, I'd just come back from England, a friend asked me if I'd volunteer for a week, and I was in absolute shock for a week walking into a place that had 200 people with developmental disabilities. And, I think this is important because it's real. I was of the community, since we're going to talk about integration in community. I was overwhelmed, shocked, felt completely incompetent, and I made a commitment. This is kind of the way I work. So I would finish the week out and I would never come back. It was really, and you as families have experienced that with other people. I fell in love with it. Everything that I was thinking about this the other day, everything that I have career-wise, and quite frankly, so much quality of life, I owe to people with disabilities. So, and the reason I say that is because I want you to listen. You don't hear this from public officials very often. I want you to hold me accountable today for what I say. Hold me accountable, right? Because as parents, I've had the absolute pleasure and grief to share with families for 27 years now. Tears. I've seen, nonstop, 24/7, 365-day-a-week efforts of families trying to find services, supports that we've promised that don't come through. I've cried with families, laughed with families, individuals, tried to find ways. And I will say this, I think this is very, very important. The whole time I've been in the field, I've worked with tons of people, be it parents, providers, or DD staff, developmental disability staff, board staff, who were truly committed, absolutely 100% committed to creating a good service, creating a good sport, creating the next new fad. And you know what I'm talking about, families, right? And I think this is a very important perspective. When I started to feel in '88, deinstitutionalization, the pure deinstitutionalization, people coming from work, we're still coming, right? So that was the group of folks I worked with, the most difficult folks to serve in terms of personal needs and behavioral needs, those kinds of things. And I've worked in almost every capacity, both as direct staff, as a sub-direct staff, program staff, and administrator. And then we had the supported living and supported employment phase, right, where we promised families and individuals that this was the best thing, right? National research says this is the best thing. We want folks to be independent and contribute to their communities, and that was right, and have a life of their own, right? We failed miserably in the supported employment realm. Okay, this opinion is not endorsed by everybody at DD. Okay, I'm just telling you straight. My personal opinion, and I think it's backed up, is based on what we promised families in 1990 for supported employment, where our kids would go out and get jobs as a bunch of us, right? Not three. Okay, and we were proud for years that we got 3 people employed a month or something like that. I heard the guru of support employment, which I didn't know her name, but apparently about a couple years ago, she came to a conference I was at. I was like, oh, this will be interesting, because I'd been out of the supported employment perspective for a while. So she came to us, and she was going to give us kind of the hype on, she'd retired and come back as a consultant. And I heard the same thing, same stats I heard like in 1990. Like, when I was starting, I was an absolute zealot. I was working in support employment, so I was going to get, everybody was going to get a job. Everybody. You remember the young, everybody's getting a job, including the families. Everybody is. We'll find teenagers the jobs too, which is near impossible, right? So that's devastating. That was devastating to me when I heard her speak, and I thought, really? We're really doing the same thing we did 20-some years ago? Another feature, Mark and I talked with SSAs, basically your case managers. We don't like to call folks cases, but that's what people relate to. We asked 135 people. I said, how many people in this crowd, how many program managers, case managers have been in the field for 10 years or more? And about 1/3 raised their hand. Okay, and then maybe another third were 5 years, and then we had the rookies, right? And we said, how many people do you serve with disabilities? Now, we serve 6,000 to 7,000 people in Hamilton County. How many people do we serve that you think are lonely? Now, that doesn't mean they don't have a relationship with some family members, but on the whole, don't feel fulfilled, don't feel like they have a really great friend. How many are lonely? What do you think just throw out a percentage. If you were just throwing out a percentage of all the people we serve, how many people do you think are lonely?
90.
Absolutely. Right on the mark. Devastating, right, for me, because I've worked passionately for 27 years. That's not the outcome that I wanted for people with disabilities, right? So how many people, we asked these folks, do you think have meaningful activity in their life? And that doesn't mean what I think is the board staff, right? Or necessarily what their favorite aunt or uncle think, but specific to how many people do we think actually have truly weekly meaningful activity throughout another number?
Only 5%.
You know what? And we kind of ranged between 5 and 20, so we said 10%. And I said, okay, as I look at professions that are dedicated, many people in I could look at and go, that's a great professional, right? And I said, really? That's what we've done, us veterans. In all this time, despite all our efforts and programs and that kind of stuff, the best we've done for people with disability is 10% of people fulfilled. Really? Devastating to me. So I worked in the, prior to taking the job in innovation and quality, and my main thrust in this is quality and particularly integration. Mark and I have had a lot of talks about, the good thing, I came from MUIP, which is basically investigative unit. So I got to see the worst of the worst. I won't even tell you what I saw, right? So the good news is I get to do the light side now. And believe me, I'm passionate, because here's what I think I know. The better job we do, we're not talking about programs and the whole Fed, mandate that people be integrated. I'm talking about your kids, your brothers, your sisters, people we care about. That's who I'm talking about. We're talking about what I know in 8 years, doing about 15,000 cases of abuse, neglect, those kind of things, right? Here's what I know. If we think that our kids, that our brothers, our sisters, our wards are kept safe by the system, data says otherwise. If we think that segregated settings and isolation with paid staff create a safe environment, that's not the case. It does sometimes, but I saw evidence otherwise. What I saw help tremendously is when more people were involved, just by osmosis. The more people that are involved in lives, the better lives people have for the most part. Unless you have my sister. She's a little bit of a busybody, but other than that, right? So here's my thing for us. I am not here today to say that integration and the movement of integration itself is going to resolve all problems. I am not here to say. I'm not to say that it's a better solution. I'll be the first. My superintendent's probably going to be upset when she sees this live video. I'm not going to say it's the solution to or better than all programs. That's not the truth either. Here's what I know. Here's what you can hold me accountable for is this. We know, evidence-based practice that Mark and I have done. We started this journey January 13th, 2015. And I'm going to have Mark talk about it. The community wants to be a part of the lives of our folks. Now, when I say community, that doesn't mean every community member. You don't even have, if we're honest, even all of our own family members don't want to be part, right? So I think that's fair. I can look at that and say that's fair. But what I know is this. We have experienced. We can show you evidence. I said accountability. You don't want to hear a bunch of crap about how this new movement's going to be wonderful and everybody's going to go out in public. That's not what you want to hear, and it isn't what you should hear. What you should hear is we have lots of evidence that the community is interested, more interested than ever, if we talk about the gifts that people have. And please let me say this. I'm talking about an individual in a wheelchair that has very little movement, okay? I'm talking about the guy that's got some of the worst behavioral issues. Because we have people that want to help. But we also, those guys, my guy Ed, who I served for years, had tremendous institutional behavior. But he was beautiful most of the time, right? So that timing was important, right? And when he knew people were interested in him, his behavior improved dramatically. It's important for me to bring you real hope. It's for everybody. Integration is for everybody. How we do integration is really important, right? For some folks, we have to do what we call reverse integration. I promise to be real with you and say, here's the thing. We know that we serve some folks that the likelihood that day one they start out, they just run out in the community and say, hey, is not necessarily the best answer. So we're working hard at community integration. Example, we have a young woman. I was so pleased to meet her. And I heard all, I read the file and all the things that this person had wrong with her, And I talk, be careful when you talk with her. She can get really angry in a hurry, blah, blah, blah. So we started to talk. She had a great sense of herself. She said, you know what, Mr. Metzger, she was very shy, but Mr. Metzger, I just can't work with a bunch of people. I work really hard. I'm a great worker. I just can't work with a bunch of people over my shoulder telling me what I'm doing wrong. I was like, okay. That's better than anything I read in the file. Well, she's got a good sense of herself. I said, so what would your job look like? And she told me, I won't bore you with all that, but basically she gave me a good snapshot. And what we figured out is because she serves her family, she has her own daughter and all those kind of things, and she has some very difficult mental health issues. But she loves her family, serves her family. She can only work third shift because she serves her family in the day. I thought, well, when does she sleep? So one of the things we began to look at is, could she not have a job that we bring into the home? So one of the things we look at, we don't know if this is going to work out. Again, I'm not here to promise her. We looked at, there's many of these CD companies, just need CDs put in cases. Could we not bring those into her home where she could work so the whole family could do it? They don't care who does it. But basically, you bring that product in, and she can do those things. She doesn't have to work third shift. She can do that as they do things, and she can create and get some money, income. That's not the answer for everything, but you understand, that's innovative. And so everything we're trying to do is look and say, what is your situation? Not this big, vanilla, bland situation where we go, hey, we have a slot where people pour throughout in the community. That does not work for your kids. It doesn't. It's personal. So I always try to give you a takeaway. Here's the thing. No matter what you hear from us today, you can call us personally. I put cards up there. I think I'm too short, but I'll give them a number too. Think of this as your personal integration counselors. If you want to talk about integration, you want to call us and say, hey, I just don't think this is working. It's not working for me. That's accountable, right? I'm having a difficult time understanding this integration. I'm having a difficult time buying into it. It's not working for me. What's going to happen to my kid, my ward, my brother, my sister, me, right? Is funding, dries up here or there, or they move things around. None of us have any control over that, or not much, I should say not much. Here's what we do have control of. The folks that we serve have a right. I keep saying this, I think we've accepted so much less than they deserve. They have a right to be in the community, of the community, respected. And I've got to say is they have so much to contribute. So Mark and I have really started changing the dialogue with our community. If we go to our community and say, please feel sorry for us, pity us, here's what we get. Absolute zero. Some people will jump in because of their own needs, right? People are charitable. People will jump in and they'll help. And many of you have experienced it for a little bit until it gets hard, right? But when we really assess people's attributes and we're honest about those attributes and honest about how they can succeed, which takes your input. I mean, you really, helping us understand how they can really, what would it take, what it would look like if they succeed. And if we listen to that and de-systemize it, in other words, it's personal to your child, adult child or brother or sister, right? Then we find that we're successful because we're coming to the community with something, and that's a relationship. And Mark will talk about what we promised to deliver today was evidence that this is working. I compare it to the weather report. What you've heard many times in these kind of discussions is, hey, here's the way. Hey, we got this all figured out. This is what we're going to do. Somewhere in California or somewhere in Madison, Wisconsin or whatever, or Virginia, they figured this out. It's working great. Well, I always say if it's working great, how come nobody heard about it till now? And how many people were talking? John and I were talking, I think, 2 years ago, and they said, hey, this is working, this is good, we got this guy employed, da-da-da. And we said, well, how long, so, the family's happy, he's happy. And we said, well, how many hours does he work during the week? And they said, well, 1. He works an hour a week. We said, well, he was in programming before that, so we're just wondering, what's the family do? Well, basically, the family has to work around that. Now, I'm pretty sure they didn't say this, but I'm pretty sure, the family has to come home early from work or something. Or they're paying somebody to be with that individual because he can't do it by himself. We understand. This is not that, right? This is not what we're talking about. So what we promised to do today is come at you with evidence. You are going to see evidence of stories being built. We're gonna be talking with our public relations gang. We have started in Reflections and some of our other media. We're going to recreate our website so that you can get on there weekly and see progress, stories, real stories of people. And it's not going to be the person that's got, and this is a beautiful story. Dude, we have people with college degrees that do great. I used to serve a guy, Vito. This is really funny, I think. Vito made more money than I did, and I served Vito. And Vito had a condo in Hilton. He had I forget what his last name, but it was very Italian. So I had suspicions, okay? So I have Italians in the family, it's okay. I had suspicions, but Vito had a condo, So that is a fantastic story, really. And he rented it out and made money. I try to be careful because so many families get, and truly for good reason, despair over that because that's not my kid. That is not my kid. My kid oftentimes is the kid that has been essentially threatened not to be allowed to stay in school, right? My kid is the kid that every time we have a discussion, I hear what's wrong with my kid, or how I as the parent could have done better, or maybe if we understood the new fad better, if we got on board, that we would be able to serve my child better, or the promised funding, or the lack of funding. I want to say this for everybody's benefit. As long as I've been in the field, I've never heard that we're getting more funding. Whole bunch. There's money coming, folks. Even what John shared with the budget, right? We heard, oh, hey, there's a bunch of money coming our way, And then we also heard that through tax issues, different things, subsidies that we've gotten in the past, we're going to lose millions of dollars at the same time. So the message to the public is, hey, we're getting all this money, but the reality is, no, we're not. Three-card money, right? You know, so I didn't even pass geography. I can't figure that stuff out. What I can figure out is I'll be real with you. So what are we doing? What are we doing? What are we really talking about with integration? Here's what I want. I want a couple markers that you can say, this is the weather, right? I'm setting the weather for you. I think that's what's fair. What we've done historically for our families is made these promises because the funding got cut. So we're going to try this is really what we're saying. And what I've tried to talk to our leadership team about is you now are, most of you have been and experienced enough to actually have heard the promised that and experienced the loss. You're veterans of ill promises, right? You're veterans of false promises, you know. And certainly as a total community, when we look at the stats, that's backed up. So what's going to be different now about integration? Okay. Well, first of all, we look at it every single day. We look at it as a civil rights issue. Let's not accept, you know, the basement. Example, when I walked into Innovation Quality, it was called Quality Improvement. Now, hang with me here. It was called Quality Improvement. I changed it to Innovation and Quality. Why? Well, I thought, okay, what if your quality is like 0? Well, how much do you have to improve before you get quality, right? So if this is 0, and this is where the kind of service you want your kid or your brother or sister, whoever you represent, to be, well, if I'm a provider or service or DD, and I'm all the way down here, well, you know, how much, I could go 100%, I'm only at 50%. What is compliance? I'm responsible for a lot of compliance. Well, compliance is the basement for our guys, right? That's the basement. We shouldn't even be talking about that. That means we have to police people to do the very least. That's crazy. That's unacceptable to me. So we changed it. So no. Compliance is what everybody should, that's the starter. I mean, think about this. A rookie that walks in the field, I was greener than your shirt, man. I mean, I was so green, right? It took me a year to even know what I was doing. So you can imagine, this is how sad this is. So a rookie that walks in tomorrow or today, no training, essentially they're complying. They're in compliance. Do you get my meaning there? Because they haven't done anything wrong yet. They haven't done anything wrong. That's the best we can do. So no, we're not accepting that. So as we began to look at integration, we wanted to say, look, we're not going to make false promises. We're going to demonstrate a vision, and we've done it for 6 months or so. Mark and I in a little room said, if we don't do anything else, here's what we got to do for our families and individuals. We want to create high potential opportunities. High potential opportunities, which means you as family can hold together. We're not going to look for, this is really sick, we call this hippos, lippos, and mippos because we work fast, so we have our own shorthand, okay? So acronyms. A high potential opportunity means that we have assessed the person's attributes, right? And we haven't done that through some psychologists, right? We've gone to the family, we've gone to the SSA, say, hey, what's this person, what can they contribute? Oh, well, I don't know, it's really tough. Well, do they smile? Well, yeah, they do smile sometimes. Okay, when do they smile? Well, they love candy. Do they like to share their candy? Well, yes, they do. Would they be willing to take a dish of candy to the school that they go to? Well, yes, they would. People like candy. People love sugar, man. What about caffeine? Oh, this guy drinks coffee all day. Does he like to share coffee, or is it all his? Well, he'll share it, you know. So we start to develop things that we can do. And I cannot tell you, are there all coffee drinkers? Raise your hand, please. Okay, caffeine, okay, there's a lot of us, right? It is amazing the miracle of sharing caffeine drinks. I'm serious. Take a person that has a very significant disability, but willing to share. That is important. Behavioral issue. When you bring coffee to the community, they are damned excited, right? And it starts a relationship. As silly as that seems, I'm not kidding. This is evidence. Just that little bit of contribution gets the person on the other end and say, tell me more about him. You know, tell me more about him. Tell me more about her. Hey, let me ask you a question. This is Mark and I talking. If we came back next Tuesday and did skin, would that be okay? What do you think people say? Yes. It's always a yes, right? How complicated is that? Now, does that solve all your problems, man? That means that 8 hours a day, every day, that you can be giving coffee people? No. But it gets us in, and it starts to teach us how can we get our folks invested, right? All of a sudden they have a relationship. I'll tell you a great story about this. Years ago, this is a great system story. We were around the table, we were doing person-centered plans. You've heard about this. We had 12 people in a room. I had an individual, this really nice guy. He had some quirks, did some stuff like he would hide stuff, but he got to, in his thing, in his plan, he got to put people most important in his life. Now, let me tell you a little secret. Everybody at the table thought they were the most important person in his life. The only one there that really was Mom. Mom was like real. But we break out the cute little map, the people map, and we go, and you have your inner circle moms there, and we have, me included, a bunch of us were like way on the outside. And I had a little, oh gosh, I thought me and Mike were tight. But in the middle of the circle, and this is so awesome, he wrote Mike. And now his name was Mike, and he wrote Mike. We're all like, so we do the introductions. No Mike, right? We're like, well, where's Mike? So we all start talking, who's Mike? Who's Mike? And it was like, he was there. Of course, we talked around it. We didn't want him to know that we were wanting to know who's Mike. So we get all the way around. Finally, we figure out Mike is the maintenance guy at his apartment. He loves Mike. Mike comes around. Here's what Mike did with him. Here's what we found out. Mike slipped him a pop every once in a while. He wasn't supposed to have it. Mike talked to him. Mike just talked to him, just gave him the time of day. And I said, let me ask this question. How often does Mike see you? It took us a while because he had difficult speech. How often do you actually, how often he saw Mike? 3 times a week for about 5 minutes. So, to me, I always keep that in mind. So many people can be involved in our life. Mark and my job is to help all of you who are interested in making sure that your children, that your brother, that your sister, that the people you serve are connected to people that aren't paid to be with them all the time. People that you feel good about to have a relationship, whether that's 5 minutes or 365. Okay? That's the only promise I have. I do not promise you that when we talk about, hey, what's going to happen with programming? If my kid is in adult services, we as a family, he likes to go there. We as a family need him to go there so we can, so that we're able to do as a family what we need to do. I think we'll get there. I won't promise you that. You know why? That's unfair. We don't know the answer to that yet. Here's what I do know. It costs less money. For a lot more bang for your buck when we're hooking up individuals with disabilities to real opportunities with real community members where they have real relationships outside of just their family and their paid staff. Okay? I know that for a fact. I can say that. So, what does this really mean for you? What are the indicators? So I'm going to have Mark come up and talk about that. Mark, if you'll talk about community here in a minute. Yeah, go ahead.
First, I want to thank you, the directors, for coming today. The first time we had this meeting, we didn't have a lot of you. So maybe you'll be able to answer some practice questions and policy issues.
Sure.
My questions will emanate from the point of view of children's services case worker.
Okay.
So you know that I'm green when it comes to DDS services.
Yeah.
I know when Mr. Roma spoke, he talked about levy issues and how things have not changed over the years. But the population that DDS serves, I believe, continues to increase. Now, are there some proactive ways by which your agency could seek to fund some of those who have been qualified for your services instead of being on a waiting list, even when they are waiver eligible?
Yeah.
That's one.
Okay.
Because, from my experience, I've worked with children's services for a little over 15 years. And we get, to this point, the first hurdle will be to get them to qualify for services, which personally I have a problem with because of the 3 out of 7 stuff, and then you just know somebody cannot function, but because they didn't make that 3 out of 7, no service.
Let me repeat back what you're saying, so I'm sure I'm on.
Sure.
Okay. So we have this unbelievably long waiting list. So whether you're the family and that individual waiting for services, or you're a supportive social worker, or supportive support, paid or otherwise, what you're seeing is a person standing in line with no movement. Did I got that? Right. So part of our concept through this integration is this. We want to know what are people waiting for, and here's what we know. We don't know everything, I'll say that, okay? But here's a few things we know. We know people are on that waiting list because somebody said, get on the waiting list. Okay? And our question now, we have a fundamental way to approach this that I'll get to, so don't think I've lost that point. What are you waiting for? And what do you think the answer is? A lot of people give us kind of an interesting answer and say,
I don't know.
I don't know, but somebody told me to stand in line, right? Like and to me, it likens to a bank. We walk outside and you walk past your bank and there's a long line. You're like, hey, what's going on at my bank? Somebody goes, man, you should hear what's going on, but you don't quite hear, so you get in line because, oh my gosh, right? What we're finding is a lot of people are waiting for services that they're certainly not likely to get quickly. That's honest, right? You're number 567 on the list of, a couple thousand, right? So the question then becomes is, what proactive efforts have we made to address it? We have now created what we call the core team. We just met, what was that? Was that last week, Mark? Yeah, last Thursday. Where we have done this different than we've ever done it before. Rather than just have integration folks that work on the global integration, we also have a core employment team, and a core transition team for transition students, and something that I think is really cutting edge, we now have involved our core integration, our waiting list folks, staff, and we call it intro and eligibility, whose job it is to go down that waiting list and ask people, sir, what are you waiting for? And we had, and one example that I pulled out of my head was that we heard just recently that somebody said, well, I just want my kid to do something. We said, what do you mean? We assumed that he meant like a program or something because a lot of people wanted like adult services or something. They said, no, we don't care. We just are looking for something for him to do. And we were able to recommend, I'll say this, I don't know what the outcome is, but we were able to recommend volunteer opportunities. And that's all the family needed. They just needed him to be involved. So here's the thing. We don't know how this is going to work, but we're going to make an extensive effort, go all the way down that list, and continue to assess. What is it you think you really need? Now, some people say waiver. And we ask, what is it that the waiver is going to do for you? Some people know precisely, and they need a waiver. They do. Some people don't know, but they know they need something. And that's the only answer I have so far. We're starting that process of regret. It is the expectation of the superintendent to go down that list, find out what people are actually waiting for, and see if what they think they're waiting for and what they're getting have anything to do with each other, and to be honest enough to say, hey, look, based on what you said you need, here's our projection. And you should expect that. You should expect that. And what we're finding is through what Mark and I do is we do the global integration, which means anytime we run across anything that's positive for anybody, we're dishing it. So what happens is if we're out and Mark is approaching a business or somebody, and we think we can get somebody employed, even though Mark and I don't do the employment thing, we dish it to the employment people, to the transition people, or to the waiting list folks. If you had a situation where we're working with you and something works between us, and we're like, man, that's a great idea. If we can do it for you, we can do it for these folks, right? There might be 25 people on that waiting list we can do it for. So we create this core team. We meet every 2 weeks now, just started, where we can say, hey guys, are you aware of this? Does that make sense? Because what we're learning is osmosis. Here's the thing that will not work for this county and the people we serve. It won't work. If everybody's in a single line and we have this bad program, call it integration, call it whatever you want, one size fits all will not work for people. So what we know is that we have to, and I'll give you the model and then I'm going to turn it over to Mark for the rest, is we have to individualize it, but there's a lot of individuals. There's a lot, right? You guys don't have, I was not good at math, but I can even figure this one out. You get a couple thousand people, right? There is no way we can just, I heard somebody say, hey, we do this integration one by one by one. And that's true in terms of individualizing the opportunity. But what's the chance we can meet those people's need if we go one by one by one? It can't happen. So here's what Mark and I do every day. We create high potential opportunities. We're looking globally and singly. Does that make sense? So Mark did a great job, hosted a dinner for folks at My Brother's Keeper. And we had people with disabilities come. We had people with non-traditional disabilities come. We had the community come, right? Out of that, we created a whole bunch of opportunities, a couple of which are this. One is if you walk through that room, what did I say about the loneliness? We invited some people. We know through these kind of efforts, people were talking with each other. We had UC students. We didn't even invite them. They showed up and said, how can we help? And we said, you know what you can do? Anybody in this room that looks like they're not engaged, would you just engage them? You mean we don't have to cut sandwiches? No. It was beautiful. 4 young people sat down with people with disabilities and people that just were from the street and hungry and talked. At the end of that, we had a provider that they have their own business. They work all the time. They asked, how can we be part? How can we reach out to more people? So it no longer looked like a DD function. It looked like, what is that neighborhood, Mark?
I mean, truth be told, it is a Westwood thing.
Yeah, Westwood.
It is my neighbor's place, Westwood United Methodist Church. It is their community dinner. Okay, they just ask for volunteers every month to kind of sponsor it. So we were very happy to go over and support them in that. But it is neighbors, gaggling of folks, all sorts of individuals. Much like there are 100, I'm sure, 100 community dinners in this county, at least every month. I'm sure of it. And perhaps my role will be to attend every one of those, and then I'll have health problems, and then I'll but no, it is a Westwood neighborhood thing.
So
when I get up there, I'm going to talk to you about neighborhoods.
So let me turn, Mark, I just want to hit this concept. We're looking, because this is different than what you've heard before. We're looking every single day. Mark and I call planting trees. While we have all this conceptual stuff, I'm a steelworkers kid. I only know how to produce product, right? At the end of the day, you know, you could come out and, hey, we were laughing. This young man came from Xavier. We were talking to this guy from Xavier, and he came to sell us tickets. His card said, ticket sales or something like that. We laughed and laughed because we had a little more experience. You know, he came to talk to us, and he really, what did he want to do? What was his boss's expectation of him, do you think? Sell us tickets. You know how many tickets he sold? 0. We felt really bad for him because we were nice guys, and Mark had him pinned in. Mark covered the door because we got a ton from him for people with disabilities. He had this many tickets sold. Now, we didn't take advantage of them, but we're actually trying to figure out how to get him some tickets sold so we get, what we were saying, you know, that's what you've experienced oftentimes is people say, oh, but they're nice and all this is a great program. Oh, it's really good. But at the end of the day, what did you actually get? So high potential opportunities mean we do the work. We set the table with both parties so that when we get to whether you're just looking for a relationship to be built, a job, whatever, is that you can pretty much assure, not that it will work out, but the connection is very positive. The plug's going to go into the right outlet. The community is on board. They want to try this. You know, your brother, your sister want to try this, that it isn't just this, for instance, I use a MIPO, we call medium, is when we hear somebody says, oh, I want to work in pizza. Well, and we call Rose and go, are you hiring people with disabilities? Yep. That is not a high potential opportunity, right? We've done almost nothing there. Even worse, and this is what's happened historically, what about, don't just think employment, but you get the idea. Well, what about, hey, you know, my guy really likes to work with pizza, could he get a job? Hey, I heard La Rosa's is hiring, right? That's not good enough for your guys. And that doesn't work. What works is I know a guy, right? So, it's that Italian thing again. It keeps coming out. But, okay. So, yeah. So here's the thing. Mark's going to hit us up with some real based evidence. What's really happening? What's it mean? What's it look like?
Okay, so I know you've been sitting there for about 60 minutes. I also know that the average attention span for human beings is about 40. So I'm starting off a little rough, but I hope you're all above average then. Attention span. So I'm going to make this really quick. The Admiral James Stockdale line is awesome. Who am I? I remember you, right? Who am I? Why am I here? My evidence that I bring, I guess, starts a long, long time ago. But in addition to this thing we've been doing with Mr. Metzger for 6 months, I got the pleasure of doing 4 years of doing something called asset-based community development. That's a big word. You might want to Google John McKnight if you want to learn about ABCD. Big word, asset-based community development. What is it? I think the asset-based is crucial for us. I think social work type people, healthcare type people, I worked at Bethesda Hospital for 10 years. I worked for the Department of Labor for 10 years. Social work type people are real good at telling you what's wrong with you and your needs and your deficits, like mine. You know, the first day of summer, slip at the pool, you don't have a tooth. It's true. Why lie? Why lie? That's kind of my new line. I'm hoarse from talking so much. But that's all my deficits. That's what's kind of wrong with me. That really doesn't do much for a community. Really appeals, what's wrong with me does nothing for your community. What's right about you, your gifts, your skills, your talents, your interests. Now, we got something we can use. And I also said your community. Because when we talk about communities and neighborhoods, they're yours. It's not the community. I don't know what that means. It's your community. We don't try to connect folks in Harrison with things in Mason, Ohio, because it won't work, right? Because it's too far to drive. And if I have to go more than 10 minutes in my car, I'm gonna start looking for excuses why I don't wanna go there. So we start at your front doorstep. That's where I would start. What is right here? Your question, I would give you the patently simple answer of probably the answer's in the community somewhere. You just gotta find it. I've also noticed, I'll throw it, evidence, more evidence. Well, people that are doing kind of what I want to do, remember you with the family group in Harrison, yeah? Okay, so I remember when you invited me to your house or allowed me to come to your home, which is bizarre. That's the other place where I get evidence from. That prior to this, after doing the 4 years of the asset-based community development stuff, I spent 3 years going around and visiting about 500 families at their homes 80% of the time. I conned them into letting me come to their home and talk to them. Because you're gonna get a different chat or a visit in the kitchen than you are at somebody's day program. So, right, so I was blessed, marvelous to go talk to 500 families over a 3-year period. Yeah, everybody has their blips, their negatives, little few complaints, but mostly very, very satisfied in all the life areas. We call them a life satisfaction survey. Health, they can get to the doctor pretty healthy. They like, kind of like where they live. They're comfortable with their home. It's been pretty decently maintained. The services, whether it was their day program or their case man, pretty good. I mean, every now and then a blip. But the overwhelming thing that I heard in 3 years from folks, or what they asked me if I could help with, is that, can you find them some friends? They need friends. They need peers. Because that provider, that direct care staff, sometimes we pretend that that's their friend, but it's really not. You're my friend. I don't know how many of you have to pay friends to hang out with you. Or how many people that love you and care about you pay for. Now you may have to pony up for the washer and dryer, but you get my point, right? People that care about you are not paid either. That's different. People that service your vehicle, absolutely, I have to pay the mechanic. People that love you and care about you are generally not paid. Huge difference. That's what I heard in 3 years. How they get out, can you help them get out? Can we make some friends, start some relationships? Can I give back? Can I do something meaningful? So that all together set the stage of meeting this gentleman in January and saying, we're going to see if we can pull off integration through Allie system, through Allie County system. And that's the goal. And we've had a pretty good 6 months. Now, evidence, and then I'm going to let you finish. More evidence. You wanted to hear stories. Well, Smart Man said if you stop calling them stories and call them case studies, people will listen to you more. So, need to substitute case studies. The community. Where have we gone for the community? My neighbor's place, the community dinners. That's a great way to get out and involved in your community. Volunteer. I'm a big volunteer guy. Because if I can come over, talk to you about your family member, or talk to you about what you're into, I like growing blueberries. Okay, well, where do I do that at? This country has an association or an organization for everything. I bet there's an association of blueberry lovers, if you Google it. So that's where I'm going to come, family members, would be, what are they into? What do they like to do? Jets, trains, you know what? Are they good at it? Would they want to volunteer at a soup kitchen? Trees, parks? I mean, there's ample volunteer opportunities. So I wrote these down at like 6 o'clock this morning. You probably won't be able to figure out what I wrote. But food pantries. There are clothing pantries. That's a good one. Rethreads up in, they do a lot of Latino people. Rethreads right in Fairfield, Ohio. Again, you can sort clothes or you can just be friendly. If you got nothing else, you can be friendly. That's important, right? We were most recently at St. Vincent de Paul. That was an interesting place because they're looking for volunteers to do office and clerical stuff downtown, but then they've also got 6 store locations throughout Cincinnati. So if you want to more into the retail element or the clothes thing, great. That's free, by the way, right? And again, I think the programs are great that we offer our folks, but they do cost them with transportation about 40 grand. So if you're going to go to this place and hang clothes for 40,000, why wouldn't you just go to the volunteer place for a day or something and do that? Probably gonna make some friends there too, maybe, right? I can't buy people friends. I can put them in a situation to meet people, because all of us started off. Every friend, our husband, our wife, and our best friends all started off as strangers, right? I mean, we had to meet them, and then become acquaintances, and then we kind of liked them, some of them didn't, and that's how that grew. Churches are very happily friendly. I got a weird thing, and I kind of agree with Eric on the charity stuff. I don't like to do charity too much because then the arrow only goes one way. It's like we're taking from you. We see more of the stuff as being symbiotic and the arrow kind of going in and out. So my first question I go anywhere is, how can I support you and what you find? I'm not going to come to your office and go, well, we need this, and this. Can you help us with that? I'm going to be like, you do immigrant stuff or whatever you said, right? What can we do? Then I'll go back and find out somebody that wants to, whose interests kind of match what you're into, right? Boom, there it is. What was I going to say? Remember where I was at? I know.
Evidence.
Yeah, I was 10 minutes ago. Anyway.
You were talking about symbiotic relationships.
Correct. Oh, the charity thing. I did talk to our SSAs once that are on our community team, which is basically the folks that have no funding. And one of their big issues was they didn't have really a lot of money. A lot of these folks were very poor, living on a fixed income, like really poor, right? And we know that there's food pantries, and you can go to the free store and get food, but hygiene supplies were more in demand because that's not covered under the food stamp card. And what was really missing was cleaning supplies for the home, like Clorox and bleachy stuff and all the stuff you use to clean your home. So I reached out to the Ilsco company, and it was in Oakley, and Northwest Community Church in Coleraine, the Sycamore football team, and basically they gave, this is a year ago, well, throughout the year they gave us probably a couple grand in brand new, unopened hygiene supply. Okay, that was really cool because it met a need, it was free. More importantly, those folks, come on, I've been doing this for a while. More importantly, those folks were able to dip their toe in the water. Okay, that's cool. Playing with Mark. I know Mark. I know Eric Metzger now. I know DDS. Feels okay. To the point where the one church, Northwest Community Church, came back and said, Mark, we'd like to do more. We would like to try to connect with some of your people one-on-one. We've got some members of our parish that would be more than willing to spend a couple hours a month doing whatever it is that one of your folks wants to do together. So now, if this guy likes to go to BW3s and watch basketball, we're going to find him a person in the parish of Northwest Community Church that also likes that, and they'll go out and have chicken wings on a Saturday to watch a game. That's cool. But I really, again, charity's not good, but if that's where people are at, you meet them there, right? So, I don't want to bore you with all these case studies. I got a woman that started off at Brentwood Bowl. Anybody familiar with Brentwood? Anybody live over there in Pennington? Yeah, Brentwood. Well, she had her own, her daughter and 9 other folks with disabilities kind of bowling on the side at the very last lane on Tuesdays, last 2 lanes, and they were sort of their group of themselves, right? That lasted for about a year. And after working with her, talking to her for 6 months, the most incredible thing, I take no credit for this at all, but she wandered up the other way at Brentwood Bowl, and there's a Tuesday night group there now called Just for Fun, of just citizens that bowl, 7 o'clock on Tuesdays. And blah, blah, blah. They sort of invited her, if a couple of their guys, 3 or 4 or 5, want to come join their league, why don't you do that? And she called just last week and said, Mark, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. To me, that's huge because it's no longer literally at the last lane against the wall, you know, with only folks with disabilities. Now we've sort of, she's reached out and is in the middle of Brentwood with other citizens. That's really cool. So, and she struggled with that for a little bit. What I can tell you, it's about neighborhoods. I got 2 minutes left. Great stories. I mean, there's so many great case studies. One that brings to mind is we got a great relationship going on right now with the Cincinnati Museum Center. So we've got a couple of folks down there that are actually volunteering. Not in a patronizing way, but doing some serious good volunteer work. One of my favorite stories was with KDC, who lives in Delhi, and she really wasn't a good match for any of our programs. And I met with her at McDonald's, and I said, Katie, what can I help you with? What do you want to do? She's like, well, I either want to work at a bakery or a cemetery. I was like, wow, okay, now you have my interest. Long story short, she was really smart, really loved books. They had to go to Delhi. I was like, who do I know in Delhi? Sharon Fry, the bank manager. Go, Sharon, you know, what's going on here in Delhi? Go see her at Delhi Historical Society. Her name's Peg Schmidt. Thanks. Go down and meet Peg, right? Hey, Peg, Katie volunteer a couple of days a week? Sure. No. Doesn't happen that quick, but okay. Then Katie on her own asked Peg, where else can I volunteer in Delhi? Oh, the Floral Gardens over there on McGregor. It's a community-run garden place. Just so happens Katie had a certificate in landscaping from Scarlet Oaks. And by her winning the Golden Trowel Award, I don't even know what a trowel is. Apparently it's a digging implement. She won the Golden Trowel Award for most volunteer hours logged. And because she was so awesome there, she got a part-time job at the landscaping company because apparently Delhi is really famous for a lot of garden stores. I don't know why, they're very much a garden community. Win, 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 right? So I'm going to leave it there mainly because it's 11:15. I would like you to please call me, 910-91, you don't have to, you can call me anytime, by the way, I'll probably answer my phone because I really, this is the only reason I'm here is to do integration. I mean, it's not like I'm on some career path. 910-1265, 910-1265. We can meet for coffee, we can just talk on the phone, doesn't matter. So I'm going to leave you with that. Because it's really too much. I mean, again, to me, you start in your own neighborhood. That's the best advice yet. And the evidence is very clear that there are plenty of opportunities out there. Yes, sir.
I know, you said...
You're the question guy. I love it.
I like to...
You should. I'm